The night had fallen heavy over the countryside, thick clouds pressing low, the moon hidden behind them. A storm was brewing. The winding road that cut through the valley was slick with rain, its yellow lines gleaming faintly under the car headlights. Inside the car, Mark and Evelyn Brown were silent, the hum of the wipers filling the space between them. In the back seat, their 2-year-old son, Edmund, slept peacefully, his little chest rising and falling with the rhythm of innocence. Mark kept both hands on the steering wheel, eyes squinting through the rain. "It's coming down harder," he muttered. Evelyn leaned forward, watching the water dance across the glass. "Maybe we should stop for a bit," but before he could reply, she froze. "Mark," she said, her voice tight, "stop the car." "What? Why? Just stop." She insisted, her hand flying to his arm. Mark hit the brakes. The tires hissed against the wet asphalt. For a moment, all they heard was the rain, and then, faintly, almost swallowed by the storm, came a sound that didn't belong, a baby's cry. Evelyn's heart lurched. She threw the door open and stepped into the rain, cold drops splattering against her coat. Her shoes sank into the muddy roadside as she followed the sound. Then she saw it. There, by a patch of overgrown grass and broken bottles, lay a tiny baby girl, no older than 3 months, wrapped in a torn pink blanket soaked through with rainwater. Her lips trembled as she cried, her eyes squeezed shut, her tiny fists clenched in fear. Evelyn dropped to her knees, tears mixing with the rain. "Oh my God, Mark!" Mark ran up behind her, his face pale. "Dear Lord!" "She's freezing," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling as she lifted the fragile child into her arms. "We can't just leave her here." Mark hesitated for only a second before nodding. Get her in the car. They rushed back, wrapping the baby in Mark's jacket, cranking the heater on full blast. The car filled with the soft, broken cries of the infant, and for a long moment, Evelyn just held her close, whispering, "You're safe now. You're safe." In that instant, Evelyn Brown didn't see a stranger as child. She saw the daughter she'd never had. That night would change everything. It took weeks of police reports, medical checkups, and unanswered questions, but no one came forward. No missing child matched her face. No mother claimed her. The Browns couldn't forget her, especially Evelyn, who visited the hospital every day just to watch her sleep. When the authorities finally declared the case closed and the baby eligible for adoption, Evelyn and Mark didn't hesitate. "She was meant to be with us," Evelyn said softly. Mark smiled, his voice gentle. "Then she be our daughter." And so they named her Daniela. From the first day she came home, the house changed. There was more warmth in every room, more laughter, more light. Edmund, though barely a toddler, was fascinated by the little bundle that squeaked and cooed in her crib. He'd toddle over and peer in, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Baby," he'd declare proudly, reaching out to touch her tiny fingers. Evelyn would laugh. "Yes, that's your baby sister." He didn't understand what sister meant yet, but he understood that this small, soft creature made his mother smile, and that was enough. Days turned into months, and months into years. Soon, the Browns' home echoed with the sounds of childhood, toys clattering across the floor, giggles bouncing off the walls, and the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings. To Edmund and Daniela, life was simple. They shared everything: toys, secrets, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. They never knew their story had begun on a rainy road. The Browns lived in a quiet suburb just outside town, a place where neighbors smiled, fences were white, and the sound of lawnmowers filled Saturday mornings. Evelyn, now a teacher, spent her afternoons helping Daniela with her alphabet while Mark worked late at his small construction firm. Edmund, always protective, grew into a boy wise beyond his years. He'd walk Daniela to school, wait for her after class, and chase away anyone who dared make her cry. Once, when a group of kids made fun of Daniela's mismatched shoes, Edmund had stepped in, his fists clenched. "Say that again," he warned. The boys backed off. Later that night, Daniela hugged him tight. "You're my hero," he grinned, embarrassed. "Heroes don't cry when they fall off their bike," she giggled. "You do? Yeah, but I'm older. I'm allowed." Their laughter filled the house. The Browns watched them grow with quiet pride. Edmund, thoughtful and steady. Daniela, curious and full of light. No one ever thought to tell them they weren't related. To Mark and Evelyn, love was enough, and for many years, it was. By the time Daniela turned 16, the Browns could hardly believe how fast the years had passed. She was radiant, all bright eyes and easy laughter. She'd become the kind of girl who filled a room without even trying. Edmund was 18 then, tall, broad-shouldered, with the quiet confidence of a young man who'd learned responsibility early. He had plans, college applications, part-time work, a future waiting. But what he didn't expect was the strange unease that began to settle in whenever Daniela was near. At first, he ignored it, brushed it off as protectiveness, maybe the fear of seeing his little sister grow up too fast. But sometimes, when she smiled up at him or teased him playfully, something stirred in his chest that made him look away, ashamed. He started staying out later, avoiding her glances. She noticed, though she didn't understand. "Did I do something?" She'd ask one evening, tilting her head as they sat on the porch watching fireflies. He forced a smile. "No, you didn't do anything. Why do you act so weird around me?" "I don't act weird. You do. You've been avoiding me." "You're just imagining things," but she wasn't imagining anything. Something had changed between them, a silent tension that neither of them dared to acknowledge. The more Edmund tried to push it down, the more it consumed him. It all started on a quiet evening. Their parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving Edmund and his sister, Daniela, home alone. The house was peaceful, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Daniela was in the living room, humming softly as she tittied up a stack of books. Edmund appeared at the doorway, leaning against the frame with a playful grin. "You still can't keep this place clean, can you?" he teased. She looked up, her smile lighting up her face. "Says the guy who leaves his socks on the couch." He rolled his eyes dramatically. "That was one time." She laughed and playfully tossed a cushion at him. "One time." "Yeah, right?" Their familiar banter filled the room, the sound of their laughter echoing just as it always had. But in the lull that followed, as the last of their laughter faded, the atmosphere shifted. Something broke, or maybe it just gave way. She was standing a little too close. He didn't move away. Her laughter had died down, and his gaze lingered on her for a moment too long. Then, in a split second, before reason could catch up, Edmund leaned in and kissed her. It was a fleeting moment, just a second or two, but it was enough to shatter the world they had built together. Daniela froze, her eyes wide with shock, her heart hammering against her ribs. He pulled back instantly, as if he'd touched fire. I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice breaking. "I don't know what—" She remained silent. The quiet that filled the space between them was deafening, more intense than any shout. A few moments later, Edmund grabbed his jacket and bolted out the door into the cool night. He ran without stopping, his chest tight, his breath shallow, guilt clawing at his insides. That night, he didn't return. He went to stay with a family friend, leaving no note, no explanation. Back at the house, Daniela sat on the floor, her hand pressed against her lips, trembling. It wasn't anger she felt, but a deep, unsettling confusion. The most bewildering part wasn't that he had kissed her. It was that in that brief moment, her heart had fluttered. The days that followed were suffocatingly long. The house, once filled with life, now felt haunted by an unspoken truth. Daniela moved through her days like a phantom, barely eating, hardly speaking, her mind trapped in a relentless loop, replaying that one single moment. The kiss. It haunted her, not just because she felt it was wrong, but because, in that instant, it hadn't felt wrong at all. And that was the part she couldn't forgive herself for. She would find herself lost in thought, remembering the warmth of his breath, the intensity in his eyes just before it happened. Then shame would wash over her, and she'd whisper to herself, "He's your brother." Stop thinking about it, but the more she tried to suppress the memory, the more it pulled at her. Edmund wasn't faring any better. He had sought refuge at his godfather's place across town, a small house with creaky floors and a well-loved sofa. He threw himself into chores, doing anything to keep his hands busy and his mind off her, but the nights were the hardest. When the house grew still and darkness settled in, the memory would return with a vengeance. He'd see her face in the flickering streetlights, hear her laughter echoing in his mind, and each time, guilt would crash over him like a tidal wave. He convinced himself that staying away was the only solution, the only way to mend what he had broken. But deep down, a part of him knew that the distance wasn't healing anything. It was just teaching them both how to live with the ache in silence. 2 weeks went by. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang at the old house. Edmund opened it, expecting his godfather or maybe a package delivery. But it was her, Daniela. She stood on the small porch, her hair slightly disheveled, her eyes tired but filled with a fierce determination. He was frozen to the spot. "Daniela, what are you? We need to talk," she said, her voice firm. He hesitated. "Now's not a good time." "Yes, now." Her tone was unyielding, though it trembled slightly at the edges. She pushed past him before he could protest, her presence immediately filling the small, dusty room. For what felt like an eternity, they stood in silence. She paced the length of the room once, then spun around to face him. "Why did you leave?" He stared at the floorboards, unable to meet her gaze. "You know why?" "No, I really don't," she retorted. "You kissed me, and then you just vanished. No call, no text. You just disappeared like a coward." The word stung, and he flinched, but he still said nothing. "Was it all just a mistake to you?" she asked, her voice cracking with emotion. His chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. It was, he forced himself to say. Her eyes widened, a flash of hurt crossing her face. "You're lying." He looked away, his jaw tight. "It was a mistake, Daniela. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought." He paused, then spat out the words, "I thought you were someone else." She blinked, confused. "Someone else." He nodded quickly, growing desperate, the words tumbling out in a cold, rehearsed rush. "I'd had a little too much to drink that night. I wasn't thinking clearly. It didn't mean anything." But his voice was too sharp, his defense too quick. It betrayed him. Daniela just stared at him, her expression unreadable. After a long, heavy silence, she spoke, her voice low and wounded. "Do you despise me so much that you'd rather humiliate me than just tell me the truth?" He turned his back to her, every muscle in his body tense. "Go home, Daniela. And always remember we are siblings." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she fought them back, refusing to let them fall. "Fine." She stormed towards the door, but just before she left, she turned and whispered, "You can lie to me all you want, Edmund. But you can't lie to yourself." And then she was gone. After she left, Edmund just stood there, his breath catching in his chest, his eyes burning. A part of him screamed to run after her, to take back every single word, but he couldn't. He had to protect her from the one truth that would shatter them both, that when they kissed, it felt right. So he stayed silent, letting the distance grow between them, a self-imposed exile. A month crawled by. At the Brown house, they tried to act like life was normal, but the tension was a thick, suffocating fog in every room. Daniela was a ghost at the dinner table, barely speaking. Edmund kept his distance, only sending the occasional text to his mother, checking in. The vibrant family they once were had become a collection of quiet, lonely strangers. Then, one sunny morning, the phone rang, shattering the fragile peace. Evelyn picked it up, Mrs. Brown. The voice on the other end was professional, gentle, but completely unknown. "This is Clara Harris from Child Custody and Records." Evelyn frowned, a knot of confusion tightening in her stomach. "Yes," she asked. "There's something you need to know," the woman said, her tone becoming serious. "It concerns your daughter, Daniela." Evelyn's heart lurched. "What about her? Is she okay?" "There's been a development," Clara continued, her words careful. "We recently reopened a cold case from 18 years ago, a missing child report. The details matched your daughter's. We ran the DNA through our updated system, and we found a match. Her biological mother has been looking for her for years." The world spun. Evelyn gripped the phone, her knuckles turning white. When she finally found her voice, it was a faint whisper. "Are you certain?" "Yes, ma'am," Clara confirmed. "Absolutely certain." After the call ended, Evelyn sank into a chair, the phone clattering to the table. Tears welled up and streamed down her face. The foundation of their family, of their lives, had just cracked. When Mark came home that evening, he found her still sitting there, staring into space. She told him everything, her voice breaking with each word. For a long, long time, they just sat in the heavy silence. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice soft but firm. "We have to tell them. They deserve to know." Evelyn nodded, her heart shattering at the thought. But he was right. That weekend, they called both children home. Edmund arrived first, his face a mask of anxiety, wondering what new crisis awaited them. Daniela came soon after, quiet and withdrawn, her eyes avoiding everyone. They all gathered in the living room, a room that once echoed with laughter but was now filled with an unbearable silence. Evelyn's voice trembled as she started. "There's something we've kept from you both for a long time," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We never meant for it to be a secret forever, we didn't know how to tell you." Daniela frowned, her guard immediately up. "Mom, what is going on?" Mark took his wife's hand, his gaze shifting between his two children. He took a deep breath. "Daniela, you were not born to us." The words hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Daniela just stared, confusion clouding her face. What do you mean?" "You were adopted," Evelyn whispered, the word finally escaping her lips. "We found you when you were just a baby on the side of the road, crying in the rain. We took you in, and when no one ever came forward, we made you ours." Daniela shook her head, a slow, disbelieving motion. "No, that can't be true." Tears finally slipped down Evelyn's cheeks. "We never meant to hide it for so long. We just loved you so much. We couldn't bear the thought of you feeling like anything other than our daughter." Mark's voice was thick with emotion. "Your real mother, she's been looking for you this whole time. And they found her." The room went completely still. Edmund sat frozen, staring at the floor, his heart hammering against his ribs. The ground had just vanished from under Daniela's feet. Every single memory, every moment she felt she belonged, it was all suddenly a lie, tangled in questions she never knew to ask. "So all this time," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I wasn't really your daughter." "You were," Evelyn cried, her voice breaking completely. "You still are." Blood doesn't change that, but Daniela couldn't hear it. Her world had fractured into a million pieces. She stood up abruptly, tears blurring her vision, and walked out of the house without another word, leaving a trail of shattered hearts behind her. Edmund remained frozen in his seat, the weight of his own guilt pressing down, suffocating him. For the first time, he understood the true depth of the tragedy. She wasn't his sister, but she had believed she was. And because of him, because of that one moment, she had been hurt twice over, once by a lie she didn't know, and again by a truth he couldn't speak. The following week, Daniela met her biological mother. Her name was Miriam Hale, and she lived just 2 towns away. The moment they saw each other, Miriam's hands trembled as she reached out to hold the daughter she'd lost 18 years ago. Tears fell freely down her face. "I never stopped looking," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "They told me you were gone. But I never, ever stopped." Daniela's heart, already broken, cracked wide open. She had dreamed of this moment, of a faceless mother who would appear and make everything make sense. And here she was, real and shaking and full of a love that had never faded. Miriam explained everything: the night of a robbery, the chaos, an injury that left her unconscious. When she woke up in the hospital, her baby was gone. "I searched every city, every orphanage, every lead I could find," she said, her voice breaking. "You were never forgotten." By the end of that day, Daniela knew what she had to do. She needed to go with Miriam, just for a while. She needed to understand this other half of her story, to find out who she truly was. When she returned to the Browns' house to pack, Evelyn hugged her with a fierce, desperate love. "You will always have a home here," she whispered. "Always." Daniela nodded, crying. "I know, Mom," but she didn't see Edmund. He stayed locked in his room, unable to face her. He was terrified that if she saw him, all she would see was the pain he'd caused. As she was about to leave, she slipped a folded note under his door. He found it long after her car had pulled away. It read, "Maybe one day we'll understand everything. Until then, goodbye." And as he held the small piece of paper, the finality of her words echoed in the empty house, leaving him alone with his guilt and the deafening silence of everything left unsaid. He had convinced himself that leaving her, Daniela, was the right thing to do. He told himself she deserved peace, a life free from the confusion he brought. But here's the thing about peace. When it's forced, it doesn't feel like peace at all. It feels like punishment, and for Edmund, every day was a sentence. Months turned into a season, the silence stretching longer and longer. He filled his days with routines, distractions, anything to keep the memory of her at bay. But memories are stubborn things. They linger in the quiet moments, in the space between breaths. He tried to move on, but how do you move on from a part of yourself? Then, one ordinary morning, the universe decided to intervene. He was in town, just dropping off a package, a mundane task on a mundane day. And then he saw her. She was at a small cafe, the kind with checkered tablecloth and the smell of fresh coffee hanging in the air. Her hair was longer, flowing past her shoulders. Her smile, it was still there, a little softer perhaps, but just as radiant as he remembered. She looked happy, genuinely happy. And for a second, a sharp pang of something jealousy, relief, shot through him. Then their eyes met, and in that single, frozen moment, the carefully constructed walls he'd built around his heart began to crumble. He saw it in her eyes, too, a flicker of something more than just recognition. It was a memory, a question, the ghost of everything they had left unspoken. The world around them seemed to fade away, the hum of the city, the chirping of birds, it all went silent. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping softly against the pavement. "Edmund," she said, her voice a whisper that barely carried across the distance, yet it hit him with the force of a tidal wave. He just nodded, his throat suddenly tight and dry. Hey, it was all he could manage. The single word felt ridiculously small for the chasm that had grown between them. They sat down, an empty table serving as a buffer. The silence wasn't angry, not like their last conversation. It was just heavy, filled with the gravity of time and regret. The world outside carried on, oblivious. Cars drove by, people laughed on the street, as if unaware that right here, in this small pocket of the universe, time had stopped just for them. "How are you?" he finally asked, his voice gentle, afraid that anything louder might shatter the fragile truce. She looked at her hands, then back at him. "I'm trying to be okay," she confessed. "It's strange. I have another family now, but it feels like I'm living to lives." He understood that feeling all too well. It was like being haunted by a parallel universe, a life you could have had. He simply nodded. "I know." She hesitated for a moment, her gaze softening. "I thought you'd reach out," she said, not as an accusation, but as a simple statement of fact. A wave of guilt washed over him. "I wanted to," he admitted, his voice raw with honesty. "Every single day? But I figured you needed space. I thought I was doing the right thing." Daniela looked down at her hands, which were now twisting a napkin. "You said some awful things to me that day." The memory of his own words, sharp and cruel, stung him as if he'd just spoken them. "I know," he choked out, his voice cracking under the weight of his regret. "And I am so sorry. I regret every single one of them. I was hurting, and I wanted you to hurt too. I thought if I stayed away, it would eventually get easier for both of us." She looked up, her eyes searching his. Did it? The question was simple, but the answer was anything but. He met her gaze. "No more walls, no more pretending." "No," he said, the word clear and steady despite the storm inside him. It made everything worse. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The confession hung in the air between them, soft and real and undeniable. Finally, she let out a slow breath, and the corners of her lips tugged upwards into a small, sad smile. "I hated you for a while," she said. He managed a nod, a shadow of a smile on his own face. "I hated myself too," and there it was, the truth laid bare. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. When she finally stood up to leave, she looked at him, really looked at him, and the anger he'd seen in her eyes that last day was gone. In its place was a warmth, the kind of gentle warmth that comes after a storm has passed and the air is clean and new. "Come see me sometime," she said. "My mom would like to meet you." A genuine smile, faint but real, touched Edmund's lips. "I'd like that." As she walked away, the sun, which had been hiding behind the clouds, broke through, spilling golden light across the street. Edmund stood there, watching her go, feeling something fundamental shift inside him. The crushing weight of guilt, the constant ache of loss. It was still there, but it was lighter now, replaced by the quiet, profound relief of forgiveness. Not just from her, but from himself. He knew things would never be what they were. Some things can't be unbroken, and maybe they weren't meant to be. But in that moment, he understood something vital. Sometimes, love isn't about holding on with all your might. It's about having the strength to let go. It's about trusting that what is truly real, what is meant to be in your life, will find its way back in one form or another. And as Daniela turned one last time, a radiant smile on her face as she looked at him from across the street, Edmund finally, truly understood what that meant. The future was unwritten, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel scary. It felt like hope. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the beautiful complexities of the human heart. We'll see you in the next one.